Very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers. Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk. We are, as usual, delighted to be with you on the airways. We trust that you're doing well wherever you are, from wherever you are watching. This is Dr. Carson Greene, and this is Let's Talk. We discuss information, pertinent and relevant information. Today, we are talking about evangelism now and then. But before I introduce our special guest, I want to invite you to pause for a word of prayer with us. Eternal Father and our God, we thank you for the opportunity and privilege to come by way of internet, those listening on Second Advent Radio by way of radio. We pray that you will be with all of our listeners, be with our special guest today in a very special way. Bless him, strengthen and sustain him, and grant that the information shared will prove inspirational, will be able to motivate someone to a closer walk with you. Thank you for hearing and answering. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, friends, welcome again to Let's Talk today. In the South Leeward Conference and around the Adventist world, we celebrated Global Youth Day. You see me wearing my Global Youth Day t-shirt. Show up in the cities was our theme. And so I was on the field with our young people, with our various congregations, ministering to people in the community. But now it's time for us to discuss an issue that is so relevant, so important. We're talking about evangelism. One of the reasons we were out in the community is because we're representing Jesus Christ. He has given us good news to share, to reach out to others. And for our special guest today, we have who I would describe as a veteran evangelist. When anybody in my age category hear of evangelism, I think they immediately think of Evangelist Roosevelt Daniels. We are delighted to have Pastor Daniels with us. Pastor Daniels, good afternoon. Welcome to Let's Talk. It's a pleasure, a privilege to have you featuring today. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. Greene. And it's also, I wanted to know, it's a real pleasure for me to be here. Whenever we are doing anything I'm doing anything that is going to help anyone toward the kingdom, it is my greatest delight. Thank you for inviting me, sir.
Amen. Amen. We are very delighted to have you with us this afternoon. And as indicated, people are listening on Second Advent Radio, people are listening on SLC Adventist and an SLC Church channel. And we just want to let our viewers know that Evangelist Daniel is a champion evangelist. And of course, today we are talking about evangelism now and then. So we want to get into this discussion before we go any further. Pastor Daniel, I believe that I once heard you say that you are not always a Seventh-day Adventist, and that there was a time when you, in fact, never thought you would ever be Seventh-day Adventist. So can you begin this discourse today by telling us about your early years and what your view of the Seventh-day Adventist Church was like back then?
Yes, I was born in an Anglican family. And so I could call myself an Anglican. I was christened, or what they call baptized, in the church, Anglican church, sometime after the 2nd of February, 1945. I was there, but I don't remember. I say I was there, but I don't remember. But and I was confirmed when I was 12 years old. So I became a full-fledged member when I was 12 years old. Nevertheless, the Pilgrim Holiness came to our village and began a series, and began services there, and they stayed. My cousin, whom I adored, Nellie, became one of them, and she kept encouraging me and encouraging me. At one time, I was split between the Pilgrim Holiness and the Anglican, but I think eventually the Pilgrim Holiness won over. And although I never really got baptized, I was more a pilgrim holiness. So I know about the evangelicals. I know their doctrines and all of these things. So I can say I was coming out, when I became a Seventh Adventist, I was coming out of the Pilgrim Holiness Church. Now, true, I was not, I never thought I would have been a Seventh-day Adventist, because I just thought once you became a Pilgrim Holiness and you are saved, you did not need anything else. So I expected to remain in the Pilgrim Holiness Church until I died. Now, Pastor Greene, I didn't hate the Seventh-day Adventist Church because I was not yet grown up with those big people who were seasoned haters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We hadn't reached that stage yet. Our friends in school, many of them, quite a few of them, were Seventh-day Adventists. And those of us who were having girlfriends, some of our girlfriends were Seventh-day Adventists. So we didn't hate them. But I just didn't, I mean, I never once dawned on me that I was going to be a Seventh-day Adventist.
Well, that's interesting. That you felt comfortable where you were and had no intentions of leaving. I myself never thought I would be a Seventh Adventist. But let's move on. How did you become a Seventh Adventist? What, since you felt, your pilgrim holiness, you
Yeah.
are aware of what you believe and you have no intentions of leaving. What changed?
Pastor Greene, let me tell you, what happened in Bible times also happened today.
Hmm?
Because I'm thinking of Joseph moving from being a slave boy to governor. God used circumstances. God moving from one circumstance to the next until he got him to be governor. Well, it's the same with me. I think my start happened in October of 1962. I was a young teacher at the age of 17, just began to teach when the crisis over Cuba between Russia and America arose. President Kennedy against Nikita Khrushchev. And there was a time, Pastor Greene, those of us who lived at that time, that there was going to be surely a World War III with nuclear bombs taking out the world. And one morning in school, October 22, 23, when everybody in the world thought that way, a young Seventh-day Adventist, he was only 21 years old, he stood up among us and he clenched his fist. I'm talking about Brother Cecil Sutton. And he said, there will not be a third world war. He stammered. And we asked him why. He said, because God had four angels on the four corners of the earth holding down the winds of strife. And he was quoting from Revelation 7. Now, me as a pilgrim holiness, never thought of Revelation. We knew nothing about these things. And surely, when Kennedy and Khrushchev came to agreement that Khrushchev was going to take out his missiles and what have you and so on, and the war, so that nothing was going to happen after that, no world war, then I realized what the guy was saying was true. So guess what? I wanted more.
Mm-hmm.
And one Sunday, he did not announce that he was coming by me, but he came by me one Sunday, and with his Bible under his arm, and we sat down there under my guinea tree, and he started with me Revelation 12. Then the next week, he came back, and he studied Revelation 13. Now, he spoke about the two beasts, the first one coming out of the sea, and the other one coming out of the earth after 1798. And when he came to that one, I told him, I said, this one coming out of the earth in 1798 has to be United States of America because I knew the history. And he said, how do you know? I said, because that's the time I'm the only nation was coming up at that time. He said, you're correct. No, but Cecil was championing the Sabbath, the Sabbath, the Sabbath. I had nothing against the Sabbath, but I was not in favor with it either because I was a Sunday keeper. So my cousin Nellie, she believed in faith healing. And this is what caused me to be a Seventh-day Adventist now. Here it is. My cousin believed in faith healing. So all Roberts and those faith healers were her champions. And I now began to believe her stories. And I reasoned within myself, Pastor Greene, that here you have Oral Roberts as Sunday keeper, healing. And Billy Graham was doing a lot of wonderful works. So if these fellows are doing all these things in the name of God, it must be that God is pleased with their Sunday worship. So I said, anytime Cecil ever came to me to talk about any Sabbath, I am going to let him have it. That's what I said. Well, the opportunity came one noon when we were coming home from lunch, for lunch, riding our bicycles, coming up a hill. And Pastor Greene, we were arguing. You could have heard us from here to, wherever you are there, but you could have heard us in Cedar Grove. Loud argument. And I said to him, look at Oral Roberts, look at Billy Graham, look at all these men doing great work. It must be that God is pleased with Sunday worship. And Cecil said to me, he said, listen to what Jesus is going to say to them on that day. And he said, not everyone that said unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom. He that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will come to me in that day and say, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in thy name I've done many wonderful works. Then will I profess unto them, I never knew you, depart from me. Listen, Pastor Greene. Cecil was a walking Bible. But from the moment Cecil quoted that text, I became a Seventh-day Adventist. I never argued again. I accepted the Advent message at that point. That's what has me here. That one text.
All right, all right. So you're very obedient to the word. You
Yeah.
don't the scriptures. Mhm. Now, of course, my mind reflects back on some occasions when I worked along with you in evangelistic campaigns, and I would remember hearing you saying that they don't argue with the Bible, let
Don't
them.
argue. Right.
That's right.
The moment the Bible has spoken, I accept it immediately. And that is my life today.
So what were your early years in the church like? You grew up on the island of Nevis. I was privileged to pastor in that territory. So I know very well the Cecil Sutton of whom you speak.
Yeah.
Of course, when I went to Nevis, he was my first elder. That's right.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, even though I accepted the Advent faith, I didn't begin to go to church immediately. It took me about a year because I was afraid. I was definitely afraid. Until one Sabbath morning, I got the courage to ask Leroy Sutton, that is Cecil Sutton's brother, to accompany me to church. Take me to church with him. And that
Uh,
Sabbath we were taking,
Sorry, what did you say?
Leroy Sutton.
Leroy Sutton.
Yeah,
I'd
Leroy
like to
Sutton.
let you know that Leroy Sutton is listening right now.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Leroy was the one. Leroy used to go to Cotton Ground for to do Sabbath school. They call it Brand Sabbath school. It's an organized
Yes.
guy.
Mhm.
So the morning I went over to him and I told him I was coming to church today, but I couldn't come alone because I was scared to death. So he decided to forego Cotton Ground to take me to church. And that Sabbath they were having communion, and at the end of the communion they testified. And Elder Sutton, that's John Sutton, Orville Sutton's father, turned to me and said, do you have anything to say? This man there was idea. I mean, if I were an old man, I would have been wetting my pants, frightened to death. And he's asking me to something. I just got up and said what Kennedy said. If, what it was now, the quotation from Kennedy: ask not what your God can do for you, but ask what you can do for your God. And the rest is history. I became a member of the choir. I learned from those old men, especially, you know, Elder Sutton and a lady, Leroy Sutton's grandmother, Daisy Small. Those people knew their Bible. It seemed as though they spent their whole life learning the Bible from cover to cover. There was nothing that they did not know. The first time I heard the word Zedekiah was Leroy Sutton's grandmother, Daisy Small, calling the name. I didn't know anything about this thing. So I learned, I mean, it was my training ground. And I became lay activities leader. I didn't work in Sabbath school, but in AY, I became also AY leader. And I began to work for God. And I began to give Bible studies on my own and one others. Anyway,
Well, let me just ask you, Pastor Daniel, in those early years, as you came in the church, you seemed passionate for the Lord. You just said you began giving Bible studies, etc. What was the general reaction to you going out there and studying with people? Were people readily accepting the message? Was there resistance? What was it like?
all right. Cecil and I formed a team. He was the Barnabas, and I was the Paul. But initially, Barnabas was the leader because he was the leader. I didn't know as much as he. So our first, I remember our first Bible study was with the village nurse. And Cecil led out. And the whole of the series was in Revelation. And I remembered that Monday night when the lady decided to become a Seventh Adventist. And later on, she became Nurse Brown. You know
I
her.
know that's Brown. Yes.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, and you know my disposition towards certain things too. Cecil and I were the ones that won her.
Okay.
So that's why I was very displeased. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
All right.
But I will not tell you about the other one until, because I know you have other questions coming up. She
All right.
the message under our teaching, but Cecil was the leader at that time.
So you're active in sharing your faith, active in the church. Um, you eventually became a pastor. What motivated you to become a pastor?
Uh-huh.
Um,
All right. Here it is now. Here it is. Now, circumstance again. Here was I happily teaching in my home church, in my home school, Whitehall School, St. James School. I love this school. And Pastor, I had a passion for teaching. I love to teach children. I love to see children understand. That was my passion. And so one afternoon, a Friday afternoon in 1967, September, a letter came from the education department that I was transferred to another school, that's Zion School. Pastor Greene, I cried. I cried until I bawled. I didn't want to go. I wanted to remain there, but I could not help going because I had a wife and two children to look after. And if you lose a job in Nevis, there was no second job. So I went in September. And for 2 weeks, I did not speak to anybody. Una Brown was on the staff and she would come up to me trying to get something out of me, and I would not say a word to her. But after 2 weeks, I caught myself, Pastor Greene. I said, let me work where I am planted. I did not know that God planted me there. Now, Una's older sister, Iona, had sent a challenge to Seventh-day Adventists. Leroy told me about the challenge, that she, a Pentecostal, had a message for the Seventh-day Adventists. And I was vexed about that, because how a Pentecostal could have a message for the Seventh-day Adventists? So I decided to go to work. First, I gave her the Mark Bible, so that when she read it, she would come and ask me questions. And the lady would not read it. So what was I going to do? The Spirit of God impressed me to pass by her one Friday afternoon while she was there teaching the children to knit and to do embroidery work. I just mentioned the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast. This is something that they did not know. And she looked up. She said, Daniels, what is that you're talking about there? And I continued saying, the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast. She said, I want to know what it is. I said, well, one of these days I will tell you. She said, no, I want to know to yourself, Pastor Greene. You will say, it scratched me just where it bit me. Because that's the reaction I was looking for. Today self. This now I was going to give my first Bible study without Cecil. And guess what? I went straight into Revelation 13. And when I went into Revelation 13, and I came out there at the end there with showing her that Sunday is going to be the mark of the beast, the lady took all the texts down to St. Kitts to a pastor. And she came up with all kind of other texts where he spoke, where the Bible speaks about we are not under law, but under grace. And every one of them, I was able to answer her. But one text, Pastor Greene, I couldn't handle. It's found in Hebrews chapter 7 and verse 12, where he spoke of the priesthood being changed. There's also of necessity a change in the law. I didn't know what it meant. And so I told her, a little later, I'm going to tell you the answer. I leaned over my window and I prayed. And the Holy Ghost impressed me to continue reading. Continue reading. And then I went over to chapter 8 in Hebrews. I saw clearly that Jesus was of the lineage of Judah, which is not the priestly tribe. So for Jesus to be priest, there had to be a change in the law that made men priests. And when I gave her the answer, she was pleased. But one problem, and that was speaking in tongues. Remember Pentecostal now? They believe in speaking in tongues. And when I told her that these tongues are not languages, they're just gibberish. Her reaction was, Daniels, don't talk in chauvinist to me. So I opened my little Bible. It was very little bigger than the cell phone. And I had her read Acts chapter 2. I remembered exactly where we were when she was reading it. And when she came up to the part where it says that these tongues were languages, she gave in. She accepted the message. And Pastor Joseph was having a crusade at that time. So I told Pastor Joseph, pick her up at night. And so Pastor Joseph picked her up. The baptism was on the 3rd of December, 1967. And I was the deacon. I forget to tell you, I was a deacon. Well, first of all, I was the projector operator for Pastor Joseph. And I was a deacon that led them to the watery grave down in Long Hall. And when I got back to school, the Monday morning, the 4th of December, my whole mind, my heart everything was changed inside out. I no longer wanted to be a teacher for the government, but a full-time soul winner. That's when I received my call, not to be a pastor, not a pastor. It was to be a full-time soul winner. May I tell you also here that Tisha Iona was the first, she and Penny were the first to be baptized in that village. But Yuna, her sister, on the staff, when she heard about what I was teaching Iona, she came and asked me to give her the Bible study. And when I finished when I gave her the Bible study in Revelation 13, at the end of it, Yuna accepted Christ, accepted the Advent message after one Bible study. And that is the same Yuna that you have here in St. Croix, now Pathfinder, Director, everything around the place there. I'm talking about 1967 until now.
Wow. You have an exceptional memory. You're quoting those baptism dates
Yeah,
with a certain degree of accuracy that is
accuracy, 3rd
amazing.
of December. And so my call came when I went back to school on the 4th of December, 1967.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, and you kind of have answered the question because you clearly had a passion for evangelism. You were impacted by Ione Sutton, and again, these names you're calling are very familiar to me. I worked in that district. Um, but being a pastor does not necessarily make one a good evangelist.
Mhm.
So talk to me about your passion for evangelism and you going into ministry. It was clear that evangelism was going to be your major focus, wasn't it?
Yes. No, let me say here. Um, a lot of people say that God called them for this or for that. I don't doubt anybody because there are various ministries in the church. But I'm 100% certain that I was called to win souls. I don't even call myself an evangelist. I'd say a soul winner. Because sometimes an evangelist comes out with his flair, and when he's finished, he goes away unconcerned about the people that he left behind. You know, it was not so with me. And there are some folks who they are very passionate about evangelism. So before they were ordained, but the moment they're ordained, they no longer want to do any evangelism. But you know, not so. It became. I believe with all my heart that the same spirit that Elijah had, God put it in me. I cannot. I hate even think of anybody going to hell. I see the whole world in front of me, either saved or lost. And if you are not saved, I have a message for you. That is my outlook. That's Paul's outlook when Paul said, I count not my life dear unto me. You find it in Acts chapter 20, no, yeah. For the excellency of the gospel, listen to me, I have the same attitude toward human salvation. And coming out of the Pilgrim Holiness Church, evangelical, where you thought that you were saved, and then you find that you were so wrong. I couldn't help but help to straighten out evangelicals, these people. And the idea is where the passion came from. I found out for myself that they were wrong. We were wrong. We were all wrong.
Well, Pastor Daniel, next week we are going to talk about, yes, we're going to have you back next week. We're going to talk about some of the unique features of Adventism.
Yeah.
But for now, let's look back at some of your experiences. When was your first crusade and what was the experience like? I mean, I kind of skipped here asking you about your years in CUC. How was it?
No, but why you skip it?
So I'm going back there now. That's why I'm going back there, right?
Okay.
That's why I'm going back there. what was it like, in preparation? Going to CUC. Was it CUC? But did they
Yeah,
call it
it
CUC
was
back then?
CUC at
Yes,
the time. It was CUC.
CUC.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the experience like and coming out of CUC as a young pastor, etc. But
Okay.
let's start with you, CUC.
Let me tell you, first of all, I went to CUC knowing that, well, it's the door to evangelism. I had to be a pastor. But Pastor Greene, all right, when I got to CUC, I lost the vision. No, I mean, I had no desire to hold any crusade. Some of my colleagues, they held one, two crusades, and I had no desire. All my desire was the books. Study and study and study. And now, here it is now. I thought, well, what happened to me? I personally thought to myself, I asked myself, what happened to me? Because I had no desire to conduct any crusade. But the moment I left CUC and I landed on the field, the vision came back
Mm-hmm.
immediately. But before we talk about that, let me tell you how I got through CUC. I spent some of the best years of my life in CUC. I had a wife and two children. I lived in the complex. That's very expensive in those days. Started off with $120 rent. And I mean, we are not talking about 2020 and so on. We are talking about 1972. I entered Caribbean College on the 3rd of September, 1972. My I had spent 2 years and a half in St. Croix working in construction. That's how I learned that's how I learned to build. And I obtained money to take us through 1 year. But Lord, how was I going to make it for the next 4 years? For it's not I alone. I'm not living in the dorm. I'm living in the complex. So after the first year, Pastor Greene, I came to St. Croix hoping to get a job. And I did get a job as a carpenter. I was paid $3 an hour, and that was big money in those days. But I calculated in my mind, Lord, if I continue this way, I could not make it. But I was laid off after 3 weeks. And an older brother, a sage named Brother Ham, said, why don't you canvass? So I went to canvass. My first day, I stole $38 worth of books, but I persisted. I continued. And by the end of the summer, I had sold $6,666 worth of books. Half of that was mine. Pastor, I never had to work again. Listen to me, every year from then on, I canvassed.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived the best years of my life without any need or want of anything. And added to that, I was a farmer. So you can imagine every morning early I got up, I went up in the farm, Alan Walters and we came down and we sent the children to school and I began to study. 1 o'clock we were in class and all things. Man, it was a marvelous life. When I left CUC, I had more money than when I went in
Wow.
through canvassing.
That's it. So you went through CUC with your family and you came to graduation. Did they place you back in Nevis? Where were you? Talk about your
No, no, no.
experience with
In
the
those
pastor.
days, Pastor Greene, they didn't send you back to your homeland. No, the Adventist Church in the Caribbean, and especially because the conferences were larger, we had many islands. They did not send a pastor back to back to his homeland, unless it was like, I think Ives Roberts was sent back to Antigua at one time, but not as an intern. So I was sent to Antigua, and my senior pastor was Pastor Johnson Trotman. The district was consisted of St. John Church, Greek Church at the time, Pigots, Potters, New Church, and Cedar Grove. 5 churches. And I'm telling you, it was one of the greatest blessings to have been sent under Pastor Trotman, who was at that time one of the leading evangelists of the Caribbean. Yeah.
Very well. Now, I want to pause to ask a question from one of our viewers. From time to time, I probably didn't tell you this, but some of the persons listening ask a question or two. And so I want to pause here. We're going to get back to your early ministry.
Yeah.
But somebody's asking a question here. They say that you have been a renowned evangelist, winning many souls. But recent statistics indicate that up to 40% of individuals who join the church are leaving. What do you think are the contributing factors to this?
I prefer not to answer that as yet.
Okay, so the answer is going to come up sometime.
Yes, because I think as I look through the questions that you have posted there for me, there will be opportunity to answer those questions.
All right, so let's go back to your early years as a pastor. You're now in Antigua. You're working under Pastor Johnson Trotman.
Yeah.
He's one of the leading evangelists. You have a passion for evangelism, and you recounted that that was a blessing to you.
A great blessing.
Yes. So talk to me about those early experiences.
All right. Well, I came to Antigua not in June. I graduated in June, but because my wife did not graduate the same year with me, the president permitted me to do one more canvassing. And so I left CUC in July for St. Croix, as usual, to canvass. And within 1 month, I had delivered $15,500 worth of books. Now, that is only those days. And I spent the rest of the time in collecting. So I came to Antigua now under Pastor Trotman to begin my ministry on the 17th of October, 1976. And I remember as I said, the vision came back. And he said to me, we had a conversation one day where crusade came up, and he said, just speak the word. As soon as you say it, I'm ready. I said, I'm ready. I told him I was ready. And imagine, I landed there on the 17th of October, 1976. And I was under the tent in Pigots on the 9th of January, 1977.
So that was your first crusade?
My first crusade.
All right.
Barbara Bell was the chief of my head of sales.
I spent most of my day today, as I indicated, today was Global Youth Day. I'm still wearing my Global Youth Day t-shirt. I spent most of the day in Pickets today. I was with the brethren there at Pickets. They had a health fair. We were in the school doing cholesterol checks, blood pressure. There were doctors, counseling. I was in the counseling room for most of the morning, counseling various kinds of individuals. So the church is still there, and I didn't know before that Pickets was your first crusade. So
my very first crusade.
In those days, how long did you preach that first crusade?
Yeah, my first crusade was a little shortened because it was 6 weeks.
A little shortened, but 6 weeks.
It was 6 weeks. And Garfield Joseph will tell you, because he was baptized on the 5th of February, 1977, in the first baptism. Garfield Joseph, the head of Blizzard.
New Interrupts. Yes.
He was a young fellow at the time. Yeah, but I'm just telling you, he was baptized in that crusade.
Okay. Again, you continue to amaze me with the memory that you have. Now, you've had many crusades over the years. Of course, we don't have time on Let's Talk to go through all of your crusades, but I want to ask you a very interesting question now. Can you think of a crusade that did not go as well as you planned or hoped? What, if any, were some of the mistakes you made? Because we're really talking about evangelism, so we want to go into evangelism. That's the
Yeah.
idea.
All right. I remembered I did something foolish. The Villa Church was dedicated on the 31st of May, 1982. And I planned a crusade that same night after the dedication. I mean, I had a whole lot of energy and so forth. But it was a bad time to have it. I should have given the people some time to recover because they really worked hard. It was a mistake. So that they could not respond to the crusade to support it as they should, as they used to. I admit it was a mistake, but it was my zeal that overwhelmed. I thought the newness of the church would have, but no, I could have let them, give them a month off because, Pastor, they worked hard. They worked hard to finish the church. And they needed the time off. So that is one of the crusades that I thought, well, I made a big mistake in conducting that one. Then I had a crusade. Okay, this one now was out of my hand. It was in St. John, my very first crusade that I did my only crusade I did in St. John, Virgin Island. I preached for 6 weeks. And at the end of the 6 weeks, not a single soul of St. John community accepted the message.
Wow.
I did have a baptism, but it was children from the church. And there was a grown-up woman who was, as it were, coming back. But nobody from the community. And I knew why. St. John Church, St. John community, everybody is affiliated with some evangelical church. And that is why when you preach to them, they believe that they are already in heaven, so they have nothing to learn. It was like water on a duck's back. They heard and they didn't hear. Well, it was a blessing in disguise because from that moment, from that crusade, Pastor, I waged war against evangelicals. So every crusade after that, it was geared, my target was evangelicals.
So what I hear you saying, Pastor Daniel, is that even when your crusade does not turn out as well as you would like to, it can be a learning experience.
Yeah.
And a good evangelist ought to be able to learn from mistakes and miscalculations, etc.
Yeah. Because I mean the next crusade, no, look man, imagine here am I in 1986. I baptized none. But my first crusade in 87 was Dominica, where we had 615. So from 0 to 615. So why am I going to be fussing over? No, let God teach me. But I became an attacking tiger, and I learned by God's help to handle those evangelicals. I will tell you later.
Well, back in the early days, as you just said, you 6 weeks is a short crusade. So evangelistic campaigns went for 8 or 9 weeks. Now, these days, we tend to go for shorter periods. What is your view of the shortest series, and why do you think that way?
Okay, Pastor, this take for time out. Give me a moment.
I didn't hear that.
Time out. Give me a moment. I'm coming back.
Okay, no problem at all.
Just,
So for
yeah,
our
I'm coming back
viewers,
to answer the question.
yes, our viewers, we are talking with Evangelist Eugene Daniel.
No,
He
no, no. It's not Eugene, Pastor.
is a retired evangelist.
It's not Eugene.
Here, did I say Eugene? Sorry, we're talking with Roosevelt Daniel. My apologies for that. We are talking with Evangelist Roosevelt Daniel. He is now retired, living on the island of St. Croix, and he has been sharing some of the early experiences. He shared with us how he came into the Seventh Adventist Church, out of I believe he mentioned Pilgrim Holiness, and the early zeal he had uh, for God, for sharing the good news of salvation, how he would go about his home village of Nevis with one Elder Cecil Sutton, ministering to people, and that occasion that led him to doing a Bible study with one of his fellow staff members as a teacher. And when she got baptized, the impact it had on him, that the following morning when he went to, or rather the Monday morning when he went back to school, he just knew that that was not the place for him anymore. And he, of course, responded to the call to prepare for the gospel ministry. So that's where we are now. He told us about some of the early experiences. His first crusade was in Picats, Antigua. And I'm asking him now, what is his view on the shorter series? Back then, they preached for 8 weeks, 9 weeks. I just asked him what is his view on the shorter series and why he has a particular perspective. So, Pastor Daniel, tell us your
Yes.
view on the shorter series.
Now, Pastor, I never worked with, I'm asking you a question. I never worked with a big evangelist, but the closest I came to one in those days was K.S. Wiggins. And that was 1971. That crusade began on the 26th of September, 1971. That was the crusade that raised up Central Church. The first baptism was the 30th of October. And I'm telling you my view of it. K.S. Wiggins, what I observed was the best thing that happened to the Caribbean. Now, when I listened, I couldn't help but saying to myself there that I was learning. I knew my calling and I was learning. And K.S. Wiggins, the ease in which he used those texts to convince, especially those Pentecostals and Baptists and so on, I said, boy, evangelism is easy. Now, I noticed that he had his seminar at the end of week 4. And then the first baptism was at the end of week 5. Imagine, at the end of week 5 was his first baptism. So that is structure that I had in my mind. And then he had other baptisms. Okay, now, hear me now. I'm going in my first crusade. Pastor, the only thing I had to fall back on was K.S. Wiggins' crusade and what Trotman was going to do with me. So one day, Trotty put me down, sat me down, and he said to me, he made a statement to me that set the stage for all of my crusades. I understood. I didn't understand why Wiggins had his seminar at the end of week 4, nor his first baptism. I didn't understand the reason. But Trotty, in that statement, helped me to understand. Trotty said to me, before your Sabbath seminar, all testing truths should have already been presented. That was a law. All testing truths. No, Pastor. Put down the testing truth in order on a piece of paper and then spread them out. How long is it going to take you to present all of these testing truth? Or is it that you want people to come in the truth to the Adventist church without any testing truth? It takes time, Pastor Greene, to present the testing truth. The Adventist church is not like the other churches. There is a vast difference between this church and the Pentecostal, the Baptist, and all, and it is the doctrines. They must be presented. And that is why the Sabbath seminar comes at the end of week 4. And then you call for baptism, to have a baptism for the end of week 5. Now, you can end your crusade right there. But then, here it is. Matters not how many baptized in that first baptism. If you say you baptized 250 in your first baptism, you can baptize 300 more by the end of the crusade if you continue for another 3 weeks. So these way the 3 weeks come in. The extra 3 weeks. Now, what happens at the end of during those 3 weeks? The first part of my crusades, usually, the ones who are baptized are the easy ones. And the people who have committed sins of the flesh, like adultery, fornication, stealing, lying, and all these things. But the tough ones are those evangelicals. Pastor, they are in sin. But what kind of sin? Not sins of the flesh. They are not thieves. They are not liars. They are committing apostasy. And apostasy is the first 4 commandments. And the Sabbath is right there. So for the next 3 weeks, I am attacking those evangelicals. Those are the tough ones. So that's why I don't preach out myself in the first 5 weeks of the crusade, but I reserve myself now, all the best texts and so on, for that second part of the crusade, where I'm going to be dealing with the tough evangelicals. Now, I remember Pastor Otis Brown said that he was baptized, he accepted the first night he came. That's when he St. Kitts in 2006. But what he forgot, that there were 3 weeks to come. So he was actually settled in the message with those 3 weeks. Now, I hear somebody say, well, but Pastor, on the day of Pentecost, only one sermon that was needed to baptize those people. That's true. Those people were Jews. But ask Paul, when Paul went out on missionary journeys, and he was speaking now to people who did not know, the Gentiles, and he had to spend considerably more time. In Ephesus, he spent 3 years. In Corinth, he spent 1 year and 6 months. You have to teach the people. You must teach the people. I am not saying that they will not backslide. Some of them will not go back. But it will not be droves going back. Moreover, a man cannot make a decision on an issue that he does not understand. Let me give you, for instance, 2006. I was doing a crusade for Pastor Reginald Michael in New York. So I paid a pre-crusade visit. And one night, when I finished the morning, preaching in the morning, a lady came to me and said, Pastor, I don't believe in Mrs. White. I don't believe in Mrs. White. And she gave me the story. She said nobody told her anything about Mrs. White when she got baptized. And when she came to the class, this Sabbath school class, she heard him calling Sister White, Sister White, Sister White. So she asked, who is this Sister White? And the elder said, girl, you don't know you have to believe in Sister White. And she said, I'm not believing, you know. And they disfellowshipped her. Now, that should not happen. In my crusade, there are 4 teachings on Sister White. 4 teachings on tithes and offering. 4 teachings on how to keep the Sabbath. I mean, you know, you have to let people know what they're up against so that when they make a decision, it is an intelligent decision. You cannot ask people to decide on the Advent message that they never heard.
So what I hear you saying, Pastor, is that when we, I mean, I'm looking up at the time and I realize that we are almost out of time.
Yeah.
But you're going to be here next week again. So
Yeah.
what we didn't cover this week, we will go into next week and maybe add a third week if necessary. But anyway,
I'm
what I
a
hear you saying
Yeah.
is that when you preach a 1 week crusade or 2 weeks crusade, you're really not, you don't have time to build a foundation to lay out the solid biblical basis of what we believe to lead people to accepting with the understanding of what they're getting into. Am I interpreting you
Yeah,
correctly?
you're correct. The pastor, the sower, the parable of the sower. If you read the what Jesus said about those who fell on good ground, he said they understood. He said they understood. How can you make an intelligent decision on an issue that you don't understand? What are you coming into? Emotion. Emotion is going to wear off. Listen to me. The most difficult decision anybody has to make is to become a Seventh Adventist. Let the people know up front. Show them the gospel. Show them the Advent message. It takes time. It takes time to build.
But our discussion is at an interesting section here, and we really don't have much time because
Right.
I was going to ask you, what do you say, if we can at least maybe answer this one and then next week we will continue. So what do you say to people who say, well, you know, these days, and it to some extent is a reality, that these days people seem to want instant things, you know. Once upon a time, you didn't, when you were in the prime of your evangelistic activities, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have internet, we didn't have all of these attractions. So somebody coming to a tent for 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks could be explained. And so there is this argument that, well, how are you going to get somebody to come to a tent for 8 weeks? How do you respond to that?
Okay, Pastor, I was not only from the ancient of days.
Okay.
I was here with the transition too. Trust me. I remember in Guyana in 2001, every young person on the tent there had a cell phone. That tells the story. And I loved it. I encourage them to come with the cell phone. But call your friends and tell them what's happening here and so on. But, you know, we'll talk about that some other time. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed, because
I don't care what anybody says. You know, I don't care what anybody says. You cannot make a Seventh Adventist in 1 week and 2 weeks.
so my final question to you, and this, I want to preface this by saying, this is Let's Talk. We deal on this program with hard issues. We do not sugarcoat. But over recent times, there has been a number of what we call impact campaigns, you know, so we send people, evangelists from this place to that place, and it's a 1 week campaign. And we have goals, you know, in this 1 week, we want to see you baptize so many persons, etc. So you're saying that you really don't think that that approach is
But Pastor, you want to deal with it next week?
we
Because
can we can deal with that next week for sure.
yeah,
Definitely.
I don't
Something
want.
for you to think about.
I
Yes.
believe in time. I believe in time.
Okay, sure.
You're 4 o'clock now. No, I
Yes,
can't
that's
go
right.
further. I can go ahead, but you said 3 to 4, and
Yes.
I
So
don't want
so
anybody to say a Pastor Greene that he went over time.
well, yes, definitely. So we can begin with that next week, and we have so many other things to talk about.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know, but
Yeah,
you're retired, so you have time. All right.
uh,
So next week we will continue the discussion.
I am at your disposal, Pastor.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm happy to hear that. So for all of
Don't
our
worry.
viewers, for all of our,
I've cleared it desk for you. I don't have any Bible study going on now on Monday nights or anything like that, so that I have to do something else. No, I'm at your disposal, whatever you decide.
wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, and it was a joy speaking with you today. To our viewers, we are speaking with Evangelist Roosevelt Daniel. He's now retired, but he's been sharing some experiences. If you enjoyed today's discussion, next week promises to be even more exciting, because next week we want to go into some of the unique features about Adventism. We kind of began to lay the foundation for that. Pastor Daniels has been around the Caribbean. He's in fact an international evangelist. He has baptized. Well, next week we will talk about some of his great exploits for God. So remember, 3 Atlantic Standard Time next week. Until then, may God bless you and keep sweet in Jesus.
God bless you, Pastor Green, and God bless South Leeward.
Thank
And
you so much.
uh,
Yes, bye-bye.
say hi to Leroy for me, please. Leroy Sutton.
Well, he's on, so you can tell him hi right now before we close.
God bless you, Leroy. Leroy, I haven't seen you for so long, boy. That's my best buddy, one of the best buddies I ever had. He was the best man at my wedding.
Okay, wonderful. All right.
That's
Okay,
how
bye-bye. Our time is up.